A damn fine cup of coffee.
Welcome on in to your midnight book club. Tonight, we continue our journey through American Cosmic, UFOs, Religion, and Technology by DW Pasulka. Now, if you've been with us, we started off at the infamous Roswell crash site, where the author, along with her scientist professor partner James, picked up anomalous UFO material. James analyzed it, boop, 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 and determined it's either a $1 billion prank making new materials he's never seen before, or authentic crash site material. They were brought to the site by another scientist we met named Tyler D. Now, with James and Tyler D, these aren't their real names. DW Pasulka, the author of this book, American Cosmic, has to use pseudonyms for the scientists because they don't want their names to be known. They are scientists that are heavy into UFOs and the unknown. So heavy, in fact, that they both allegedly speak to off-world intelligences to get, it helps them out for their science ideas and all that. Now, Tyler D is a NASA scientist. He's had experiments on almost all the space shuttle launches. And James is a world-renowned professor. James analyzed the piece, and he found it either be unknown or a $1 billion prank, as I said. Then we met Tyler. Tyler works for NASA, and he claims to have access to knowledge that's off-world from off-world intelligences, as he puts it. He has a method where he uses to contact them, and then they kind of he says all of his experiments are memories, and these beings that he's in contact with help him with those memories. This chapter is called In the Field. The war is virtual. The blood is real. The chapters start off with quotes. The two quotes at the front of this chapter are fucking bangers, so hold on. Believe no one. Believe nothing. Jacques Vallée, personal communication. So she got to hang out with the infamous, the ultra cutie, Jacques Vallée, my favorite ufologist, our favorite ufologist. Where the fuck is this picture? Come on, baby. I know I have it here somewhere. Boom, there it is. Woo! So this is a quote from old Jacques Vallée. Top dog ufologist, studied under the granddaddy ufologist, Dr. Hynek himself. Dr. Hynek, hired by the Air Force to debunk UFOs. He became a true believer. So then they tried to debunk his theories, but they couldn't do it. But that's where we get all the wild stuff about swamp gas. That's after Hynek. He told them, UFOs are real, and we need to look into it. And they're like, that's not the conclusion we wanted you to get. Anywho, this is a quote from Jacques Vallée. Believe no one. Believe nothing. Very much reminds me of the nihilists from The Big Lebowski.
He believes in nothing, Lebowski, nothing.
The next is a quote from the infamous Red Hot Chili Peppers. Space might be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Interesting. Oh, that makes me so excited for this chapter. What the fuck? Okay, let's go. Talk to me face to face, and I'll show you what I think of debunkers. The threat posted on social media devolved from that point into a series of very specific descriptions of bodily and emotional harm. It was directed by name to Scott Brown. Scott reacted with bemusement, as he had seen it all before. The crime? Scott had demonstrated that a photograph that a poster had claimed was a real UFO was actually a photoshopped object. Debunker, quote unquote, is not the worst name one can be called in the field of ufology, but it is pretty close. It describes a person who doesn't believe in the phenomenon and actively discredits people who claim to have witnessed something anomalous in the air or in space. So skeptics, you know, they're valuable. Every member of a society is valuable, no matter what their opinion. Sorry, I'm just taking the jacket off to protect it, you know? Got to keep those things nice. Including some trained observers like pilots. Scott Brown has been called a debunker, and far worse than that. In fact, the names he has been called are not fit to be printed, yet they have been posted on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube, and in internet forums. Oh, poor Scott Brown. Leave him alone. Scott Brown is a hated man for all the wrong reasons. Scott Brown, or Scott, is a debunker and a true believer. Mwah. And that's who we really need. Debunkers and true believers. That's the only way to open everyone's minds, right? If we want to get, because that's the goal. You know, I feel like. Not debate. Just to open everyone's minds to the complex shit that may or may not be going on around us. He's a talented graphic designer and professional videographer, which means that he has the skills to determine whether the objects in the photographs and videos are truly anomalous, computer-generated imagery, CGI, or lens flares. These skills happen to be the skills of the new soldier, because today wars are waged on several fronts, and virtual reality, a misleading term, bleeds into the world of skin and bones. Physical and virtual worlds intersect and permeate one another. Scott Brown has seen the rise of the virtual UFO and its profitable hoaxes, and this has caused disturbing consequences of its development. For all its intents purposes, the fabricated UFO is the real UFO. Yet Scott resists and fights its existence because he believes there is a real thing. He is a true believer. He and the trained observers in his international group in the field believe they have photographed the real thing. Significantly, he has had anomalous experiences suggestive of UFO activity from the time he was a toddler. Again, that's the pattern we see. These people who have experiences have had them their whole lives, and they look back and there's always been like weird coinky dinkies, or they've seen little creatures in their room or lights in the sky. It's just a very common theme of all this. As a historian of religion, I know of vocation when I see one. A vocation, from the Latin term vocatio, means to be called, to perform a special task, usually a sacred mission. It has traditionally been associated with religious orders, like the priesthood or the call to become a nun or a monk. It is also associated with the sense of being called to perform a task or to become an artisan or craftsperson. Scott has been gifted or cursed with a vocation, and like many vocations, it is uncompensated, at least monetarily. The rewards of a vocation are typically spiritual, which may be hard to remember when one is in the front of when one is on the front line of ufology, attempting to bring common sense into an arena that is a true carnival of hoaxes, consumerism, and misinformation. Ooh, help us comb through it all. That's why it makes me feel good that the books that we've been reading are the same books that old DW did for her research into this American Cosmic book. So it's like, okay, hopefully we haven't been straying too far, because it's interesting because she's been so embedded in it to hear that's like, you know, it's a sea of hoaxes, which again makes me think of Mirage Men, which is a really good documentary about why it is a sea of hoaxes and how it became that way. The weariness of the fight, the threats, and the slights to his name and reputation have made Scott want to quit. In the short 2 years that I have known him, he has wanted to walk away from his work innumerable times, but he keeps coming back. He cannot stop his work, his sacred task. It won't let him go. Scott is the creator and moderator of the In the Field. Oh, what? We got to check out In the Field. Maybe they have a sick, forum online. Scott is the creator and moderator of In the Field, an international study group of trained videographers, photographers, and graphic designers who also study the UFO phenomenon on a regular basis. Those are the people we need studying pictures. Yup. The group is located on Facebook. Its members use their skills to try and identify anomalous aerial objects by identifying CGI and the common lens flares that are often mistaken for UFOs. They also provide a public service. They rule these things out in an effort to preserve an accurate record for the truly anomalous. They identify hoaxes and out-hoaxer websites. If any of the members are found out to have hoaxed a photograph or video, they are removed from the group. Amen. The members are bound by a code of ethics and methodology. Yep. And you got to hold those codes tight, baby. I love that. If they deviate just one bit from these codes, Scott deletes them. Several times I've witnessed hoaxes removed from the group, and they've always reacted with a whirlwind of vitriol and bitterness. Guys, if something's proved to be a hoax, even if you took the picture and you thought it was real, you got to accept if someone who knows what's up looked at it. Ugh, that's a shame. That helps us in the end. I learned of Scott's group from friends who told me that their videos were genuine. That is, they were recordings of authentically anomalous phenomena. I wanted to join these skilled researchers to see what they had filmed. I wasn't a videographer or photographer, so I wasn't sure that Scott would let me in, but one day I approached him on Facebook and asked if I could join. He asked about my credentials. I told him that I studied the UFO phenomena. And then, on the chance that he might respect Jacques Vallée's work, I told him that I was a fan of Jacques and that I worked with him. That was credential enough. Amen, dude. Yeah, I mean, Jacques Vallée, he's the granddaddy, right? You say his name, if you've worked with him, doors open. He immediately let me into the group, for which I am grateful. The work being done by its members and the issues that get raised demonstrate the processes involved in the formation of a dogma. The members aren't dogmatists. In fact, they are just the opposite. Each of them is trying to stop, or at least slow down, a huge, indiscriminate tidal wave. The momentum of media coverage of the UFO phenomena. The movement of the wave begins with a witness, with a high-tech video camera who documents an anomalous phenomenon. Then it gains momentum on the internet and social media. It becomes virtual, something dogmatic or orthodox, something, it seems, in which everyone believes, and something far removed from what it was originally. This is how media technologies inform UFO belief. What is your position on religion? I am sitting across from Scott at a trendy coffee shop in Northampton, Massachusetts. Northampton reminds me of my original home in Northern California. The rich smell of good coffee permeates the air, and I am enjoying the break from the sweltering humidity of the North Carolina summer. Scott asked the question carefully. I can tell that he doesn't want to offend me, but he needs to know my answer. He wants to know if my mind is closed, if I am dogmatic. The question is a fair one, and one that I get often. Because I am a professor of religious studies, many people naturally assume that I am religious. People in my field study religion, of course, but they are all over the map with respect to their personal beliefs and practices. Most of the atheists I know are also professors of religious studies. That is not me, however. I believe there is a truth, Scott, but I am open about what it is. I go to a Catholic church, but I started out as a born-again Christian when I was 11 years old, to the surprise of my parents. I believe in practicing those things associated with the traditional religions, like honesty, charity, things like that, I answered. This answer seemed to satisfy him. I realized that he asked about my religion because he wanted to trust me, but he knew he couldn't if I was clinging to a dogma that wouldn't allow me to open my eyes and see what appeared right in front of me. Ooh, I love that. And that reminds me of the quote in the beginning of the chapter by old Jacques Vallée. The quote of the believe no one, believe nothing. The study of the phenomena requires an open-minded, non-dogmatic approach. Scott almost apologized. I seem to have this ethic, this UFO ethic, he said. He didn't know how much I understood, and I appreciated that ethic. I formed the group because I had been studying the phenomenon, photographing it, taking videos, etc., of discs and other aerial objects. And I knew there were a lot of other people doing exactly what I was doing, who were from all over the world, who would post our videos in forums and groups on Facebook and in other places. The problem arose because our videos of authentic stuff would get posted side by side with videos of obviously hoaxed UFOs. The owners of those videos would say things like, "This is a UFO from the Galactic Federation of Alpha Centauri," or something like that. Exactly. Yes, that's how you know. If anyone's selling you the why, they don't fucking know. All we know about weird phenomena is out there here with us. We don't know the why. Maybe there's places in the deep dark or light of the government or corporations that do, who study the thing, who've been studying this shit for eons, but who knows? But we certainly don't. I think the point is just to open our minds to it being here, like with Abduction by John Mack, which is a thing I really love about American Cosmic. A lot of the scientists we read on here, or the people who write books about the phenomenon, UFOs. When I say the phenomenon, I mean UFOs. It's just a classy way of saying it, so you don't look like a freak. They start off as skeptics, and they always turn into true believers. It's like John Mack. And I love this book because it's like taking John Mack's journey with DW. She writes about it. She's a total skeptic when she gets to the Roswell site. Then she's looking around and she recognizes it. And Tyler D's like, "Oh, you recognize this place, eh?" Yeah, they pretty much replicated it in the first episode of the last season of the X-Files. They replicated it to a T. And this is one of the Roswell crash sites. Not the main Roswell crash site, but one nearby. Obviously, someone on the X-Files, the writer or producer or somebody, was an insider, and they let them in on what this site looks like. So it's just interesting how that's been dispersed through media. Okay, so back to this group, Scott. He formed it because he's been filming these things for, all his life. Since he's been a toddler, he's been having experiences with UFOs, so he starts filming them. He starts a group on Facebook for people to start posting them on as well. And he uses that, the people who join that group have to be a videographer or a photographer or someone who studies the phenomenon, right? They debunk the pictures that are posted. And if your shit gets debunked, or if you're proved to be a hoaxer, you're kicked out of the group. So it's only real videos of aerial phenomenon. I'd love to get access. They're private about it because oftentimes when their videos are leaked, it's posted next to a video that's a hoax. And that kind of, it kind of makes the whole thing bunk. It's just like, that's what a disinformation campaign is, right? You bury real information with fake information so no one knows anything. Anywho, back to Scott and his group. And basically, anyone who says why doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't know that these UFOs are from the Galactic Federation of Alpha Centauri. All right? That's when you got to watch out. I was so discouraged because I was trying to proceed to study the phenomena in a way that was systematic and, none of us were getting anywhere. My question to those posters was, how do you know where this is from? Did they tell you? What evidence do you have? I talked about this with researchers that I trusted, like David Stinnett. They each also worked like I did. They went out into the field and captured objects on photos or on video, and then scrutinized them. These were the people I wanted to talk to. I established in the field, basically so I can meet these people. And I stipulated certain criteria for membership. The group was formed for people who are actually pursuing and witnessing the phenomenon, UFOs, on a regular basis, with video cameras and a variety of high-tech equipment. It was also for serious researchers who are interested in the study of what these observers are doing and capturing. There are 3 requirements to join. You must shoot your own footage, stills of anomalous objects on a regular basis, and be able to present them to the group, YouTube or other. Oh my God. The footage this group must have has got to be fucking mind-blowing. 2, you must be familiar with the basics of the study of the phenomenon, UFOs. 3, you must keep an open mind with no preconceived notions about the nature of UFOs. Angels, aliens, demons, galactic federation, etc. Your mind needs to be open to all those explanations because we do not know. I like all of them, honestly. I think I don't know. I would love if it was a complicated mix of everything. I made sure to state that the group is not intended for those who wish to fuel the perpetual machinery of hoaxes and disinformation that make our work much more difficult. Yes, boo, we don't like hoaxers, boo. We do 3 things. We observe and study, we document and capture, we share. I don't accept anything that is CGI, false info, or disinfo. We don't want anything that reeks of bad sci-fi movie. We encourage common sense. Now we're going to learn about the experiences Scott had early on in his life. When I asked Scott why he was interested in the phenomenon, UFOs, he spoke of his childhood. He was careful to say that the things that happened to him then may or may not be connected with his obsession with the UFO phenomenon, although he has an inkling that they could be. When he was barely 3 years old, he somehow disappeared from the family home. His father, a police officer, was frantic when he and his wife couldn't find their son. He immediately issued a missing persons report, and a massive search was mounted for the toddler, involving the police department and the whole town. Scott was found many hours later in a nearby field when his mother frantically scooped him up. He said that he had been talking with the cows that lived in the pasture. What the fuck? That's tight though. That's a precious memory as a kid, to talk to the cows in the pasture. His mother, writing in her diary, said, Scott gave everyone a scare at 5:30 in the morning when he decided to take a walk on his own. I was so worried. We are still not sure how he managed to get out of the house, but some friends ended up finding him down the street coming from a field, and he was so excited that he talked to the cows even though they were horses. Hey, you know what makes me think about how cows have big ass eyes and how gray aliens have big ass eyes? Just saying, like maybe that's who Scott was talking to in the field. I don't know. It's interesting that the mom mentions in her diary, the kid said he was talking to cows, but they were horses. And obviously Scott would know the difference between cows and horses because he lives in the country. Scott's brother, who was 2 years younger, recalled experiencing recurring dreams about his older brother throughout his childhood. In these dreams, he would see Scott on a table hooked up to machines surrounded by people with big heads who were examining him. Ooh, abduction. Scott also had recurring dreams, in one of which he saw a giant praying mantis looking into his window at night. He actually kept a praying mantis as a pet for a time. These events faded into Scott's memory as he grew older, until 1987, when they were revived by a series of disturbing experiences. Just after getting married and moving into a new apartment complex, Scott experienced a series of episodes of sleep paralysis. One night, he sensed the presence of a being close by his bed. It was menacing, and as he tried to wake up, he found that he was completely paralyzed. The same thing happened to him again a few nights later. This time, he told his wife, "I think our house is haunted." She tried to reassure him. See, I love that line too, the haunted house thing. Like the phenomena and haunted houses. I didn't know this before I started reading John A. Keel and Strange Creatures in Time and Space. They're always connected. Oh shit, sorry, that was the neighbor's dog that scared the fuck out of me talking about poltergeist. Anywho. He's running around out there. Maybe it's a bear. There's been a bear in the neighborhood. It's not the bear, though, but maybe it senses the bear. I feel bad for that dog. It's always outside. Anywho. Poltergeists and UFO activity. When Mothman was doing his thing down in Ohio, there was a large spike in UFO activity as well. Not a UFO activity, yep, and also poltergeist activity. There was a family who saw Mothman on multiple occasions and then lights in the sky, and then had tons of poltergeist activity going on inside their house that Keel talks about. So I love that, again, all these things are under an umbrella of events. She tried to reassure him that he had just had some bad dreams. Scott wasn't buying it, however, as the feeling was too real to him. The disturbance to his normally mellow attitude lingered for days. During a visit to a bookstore, as he browsed the aisles, a book seemed to pop out at him. The title of the book was Out There, The Government's Secret Quest for Extraterrestrials by Howard Blum. Ooh, we need that one! There was one blurb on the book's cover written by Whiteley Strieber. It said, absolutely essential reading. Fuck. We do have to get that one. Because we have Whiteley Strieber's book, dude. Not Whiteley Strieber. Whitley Strieber. I don't know what the hell his name is. It's on the bottom. This guy's book, Communion. It's been mentioned multiple times. This might be a good Halloween read, to be honest. It's very spooky. About a man's encounter with beings that look like the creature on here. Absolutely essential read, right? We got to pick this up. I need an absolutely essential read. Like, I got to find a clip that embodies that idea, because that's what we need. I need a button we could press. But Out There, The Government's Secret Quest for Extraterrestrials. I'm going to try and find that. A lot of the times what's weird, I feel like these books are hard to find. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just got brain rot conspiracy brain here, but it just feels like sometimes really fun knowledge is like hard to get. Either because no one believes it and it's just out of print because no one bought the fucking book, which, yeah, that's probably it. Or something else. But back to, go on my poltergeist rant. Back to the book. She tried to reassure him that he had just had some bad dreams. Oh, Bloop Doop did that. And Government Secret. I read the book and others, Scott said, and it felt like for the first time I understood my past. The book is written by a serious journalist who reports that the topic is being studied by the government. It put all the past events in context. I'm not saying that those things really happened, but I'm not saying that they didn't either. Reading the book gave me the impetus to begin my work. That is, to record the objects I saw in the sky. And that is when I started this research. In the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes. I just believed what I saw in the photos other people took. I didn't think they would hoax the pictures. Yeah, motherfuckers. Stop hoaxing. But I was gullible and naive. I was already a graphic designer, so it was really easy for me to spot a faked photograph. Unfortunately, I began to see that almost all photos were photoshopped or hoaxed. No. Also, a lot of people I began to meet told me that I needed to be hypnotized to uncover what happened to me as a child. I did a little research on being hypnotized and regressed, and I realized that you can create false memories. That's true. You got to be careful. I said no thanks to that, and I decided it was better not to know than to know something that wasn't true or never happened. Good call. Good call, Scott. Wise decision. You know, all Scots are wise, you know? Scott's desire to identify anomalous photographs. I want to say photographs and evidence motivated him to keep his online group free from hoaxers and even free from parts of the ufology community that were not exactly hoaxers but could nevertheless do harm by harassing people who want to know the truth. Visitors from somewhere else. Yeah, God. It's interesting that Because that's what we started the chapter out with, a death threat to this Scott Brown guy because someone was calling him a debunker. He's not a debunker. He's a true believer. He's on our side. The point of all this is to open other people's brains to like an idea that there might be more out there, right? The only way to do that is to have someone like Scott here who debunks everything that's false. So anyone coming from like the Western scientific mind is like, yeah, look, anything that's false is debunked by this guy. So there's might be credibility to something anomalous. We can't just start everyone off on the Galactic Federation, guys. We can't start with Alpha Centauri. We got to start small, okay? Baby steps, ultra baby steps. But anywho, visitors from somewhere else. As in the field became better known, it started attracting refugees from the internet. Ooh, internet refugees. People, aren't we all? People who were actively pursuing UFOs by capturing videos of orbs, discs, and other aerial phenomena that couldn't be identified as planes, drones, blimps, or other natural objects and events. One such refugee was a woman from Pennsylvania named Allison Cruz. I call her a refugee, and that is not an exaggeration. She sought refuge from harassment. She had been called a liar and a hoaxer, and her computer was targeted with viruses. No! In the field was for Allison and others a refuge from the dark side of the virtual world of ufology, where the harassment and denigration of its own members were rife. Allison's introduction to the phenomena occurred in 2008, when her daughter told her that she had seen a strange glowing red plane. What? Hovering around their house in the early hours of the morning. What? But I love that. And this is another thing that I really enjoy about this Allison character. Taking her daughter completely seriously about the UFO report, right? Because another thing that's true is that children have a better connection to the weird, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because they're more pure. Their minds are open and ready to accept anything that's in front of them. So a lot of kids see shit and talk to shit and just aren't trusted or believed. This parent, their kid's like, oh, Mom, I saw a glowing red plane above our house. It was just hovering. And the mom's like, that's odd. Planes aren't glowing in red and they don't hover. What does she do next? She goes, Allison asked her to draw a picture of the plane and saw that it was saucer shaped. Her daughter had never been a fan of Star Wars or Star Trek or any of the other television, movie, or internet media about space or extraterrestrials, and Allison was excited by her sighting, considering it possibly a once-in-a-lifetime event. It wasn't a few months later, as the sky was getting dark and Allison looked up and saw what she thought were the planets Venus and Mars. Planets, unlike stars, do not twinkle. She continued to watch them and realized that they were twinkling brightly. And she wondered, why would these planets be twinkling brightly? Like this, like stars. Then they moved, and one just faded out. This struck her as something impossible. Perhaps, like her daughter, she had seen a once-in-a-lifetime phenomena. Then, one after another, it kept happening, she said. Soon after that, I heard the kids banging on the windows and screaming bloody murder. While they were outside sledding in the snow, they had seen a cigar-shaped object hovering in the sky. Then we kept seeing more objects during the daytime and at night. Finally, I realized that these once-in-a-lifetime events kept happening. Soon after that, I met a researcher, Bruce Cornett, and he said that the sightings would increase. And well, they did. Once the floodgates are opened, it floods. Witnesses and researchers often report the strange feeling that once you become aware that there is a phenomena, it becomes aware of you. They report that the first sighting is just a first, and then others follow. The uncanny feeling that objects are aware or watching those who are watching them is common. The star-like objects began to appear more frequently to Allison and others near her. She decided to upgrade her camera and a video equipment so she could document the phenomena more accurately. She spent thousands of dollars on better equipment, including night vision cameras. She also started to share her videos with the public and on YouTube and other social media, as she thought that others would be interested in her findings. She wasn't prepared for the vitriol and harassment, and she didn't understand it at all. Leave people alone, you motherfuckers. God. Poor Allison. I thought that people would be interested, yet we are, in seeing these objects. Other people in other parts of the world were posting about similar types of objects too, but they didn't get harassed. I'm not sure why I did. Allison proceeded in a systematic fashion. The objects would fly around her house and over the forest near her home. She would video them, record them, and then call the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, to find out if there were any aircraft flying during the times that she had recorded. Researchers of UFOs can and often do obtain these records. I mean, they should. When she learned that there was not, she was excited. She invested even more money in better equipment and waited to see the objects. In November of 2010, she filmed a star-like object over the forest and then called the FAA as usual. They confirmed that there was no aircraft in the sky, and then when she recorded her object. She got a copy of the data disk, and the FAA had put together the event. It was titled the Murraysville UFO. Because Allison was recording so many of the objects, Because Allison was recording so many of the objects, she was able to determine their patterns and behaviors. Early on, she said she noticed that they would mimic conventional airplane lights. I thought to myself, they are copying our lighting arrangements so they can imitate us and not be recognized. She also noticed that they seemed to be aware of her too. On her YouTube channel, she posted an open invitation to others to come and watch the objects and video them. She said that when people took her up on her offer, they noticed that the objects seemed to disappear when Allison grabbed her video camera. It was funny. They seemed to be shy or something. Allison thought it was strange that people from all over the world were posting videos of aerial objects that behaved in ways that were similar to the ones she was observing. To me, this counters the theory that these objects are secret military planes or craft or black operations. That theory might be true if they were being seen just here in the US, but they are coming in from everywhere. Australia, Europe, Pakistan, everywhere. But I mean, a program would also be able to reach around the world if the man-made UFOs are real, which they are. I believe they would also be able to go around the world. But I think it could still be both, but I don't fucking know. Good point though, Allison. After many years of observing her quote-unquote punks, as she calls the objects, she speculates about what they are and why they are here. Like Scott and Tyler and James, she admits that she ultimately doesn't know. It seems as though the star-like objects are actually their vehicles, the things that they travel within. These sometimes open up, kind of like a zipper, and let other smaller objects come out of them. Neither me nor anyone who has observed them with me has seen a being emerge, nor has a being or anything from there ever communicated with me. Maybe there are no beings associated with them, and they are just purely remote controlled. Maybe they are like our Mars rovers. They are sent here to gather information or for beings who live elsewhere. I don't know. Maybe they are from our future and are our future selves. And that is why they can't communicate with us, because they would change our present and their own history if they actually did make contact. Or maybe that is why they don't communicate with us. For Allison, one thing was clear. Her life took a dramatic turn when she discovered that her house and the forest near her house lay under a very busy sky. She felt a duty to document the objects that flew in and around her neighborhood. The once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that had one day presented itself became an almost daily occurrence, and it also became her passion. I had to document and record this. This is history. We are being visited by visitors from elsewhere. Whoa, okay, excellent. And we're actually going to have some pictures here coming up, which that's cool. So buckle up for that. We got, not only do we have words tonight, we got pictures. UFOs are photogenic. Scott reached into his bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table between us. Mysterious. These are my best captures, he said. There were 2 photographs of an aerial object partly hidden within clouds. He had blown up the capture by several degrees, each displayed in a separate box for me to view. I studied the images. I saw a metallic-looking, somewhat round object that looked like a classic UFO, figure 3.1. This is figure 3.1. On the YouTubes, I'll make it more clear. I don't know if it's going to zoom in. There it is, baby. So this is one of the pictures that Scott took of a UFO. I recalled Carl Jung's remark that flying saucers are not photogenic. Jung was responding to an encounter much like mine with Scott. He was confronted with the testimony of a worthy, honest man, and it made him wonder about the topic. He went on to write his book about flying saucers. For him, they were not just a rumor or just a myth, but a living myth. He also called it a universal mass rumor, which he said reversed our enlightened rationalist. Which he said was reserved for our enlightened rationalist age. Jung wrote, considering the notorious camera-mindedness of Americans and surprising how few authentic quote-unquote photos of UFOs seem to exist, especially as many of them are said to have been observed for several hours at relatively close quarters. I myself happen to know someone who saw a UFO with hundreds of other people in Guatemala. He had his camera with him, but in the excitement of he completely forgot to take a photo, although it was the daytime and the UFO remained visible for an hour. I have no reason to doubt the honesty of this report. He has merely strengthened my impression that UFOs are somehow not photogenic. Almost 70 years have passed since Jung wrote this. He was correct about the American propensity to document and record events with their cameras. Today, they're cell phones. Since the 1950s, UFOs have been photogenic. Since the 1950s, UFOs have become photogenic, a fact to which the work of Scott and members of his group attest. Jung did, however, offer a valuable methodological approach that addresses the photographic evidence of UFOs. Its dissemination and its link to the formation of mass belief. He was writing in the 1950s, and the internet had not yet been invented. But this new form of information, dissemination, became the key that would unlock and help us understand Jung's persistent speculations. Jung was apparently ill at ease, if also excited about the prospect of studying the UFO. Every man who prides himself on this sound common sense will feel distinctly affronted by reports of UFOs, he wrote. This, however, would be a mistake. Psychologists who are conscious of their responsibility should not be dissuaded from critically examining a mass phenomenon like UFOs. He proceeded to carve out a method for studying the phenomena. That method was predicated on the first denying that there was a real UFO. That method was predicated on first denying that there was a real UFO. The apparent impossibility of the UFO report suggests the common sense that the most likely explanation lies in a psychic disturbance. The site for the proper study of the UFO was within the human psyche. At this point, Jung introduced his concept of amplificatory interpretation. By this, he meant a process that an individual or group engages in when confronted by an unknown object, in this case, an aerial object. This also applies to objects in dreams or visions. According to Jung, the meaning of the object has to be completed, because at first it is confusing, like the confusion Allison felt on the night in 2008 when she thought she was looking at planet Venus. After it blinked and faded out, she said to herself, "What the hell was that?" She was confused. Jung wrote that the UFO was apparently impossible. He didn't say it was impossible. His point was not necessarily to dismiss its objective reality, but to move the study of it into the realm of the psyche. His field of expertise. It was a methodological strategy. Young missed an opportunity to note that it is the potential physical reality of the UFO that causes it to be a living myth and a universal mass rumor. It is both a myth and a potential future reality. I mean, that's why it persists so hard, right? It's real, but there's most of what we know, quote unquote, about it is just a myth or misinformation. He nods in this direction, noting that contemporary physics has revealed so many scientific truths that appear miraculous that UFOs can easily be regarded and believed in as a physicist's miracle. Its realism is what gives it its bite. It is also what makes it religious. Religions work because practitioners believe that their truth or truths, even without overt evidence to support them. Religious truth practitioners point out, exists independent of belief or disbelief. This is just what billionaire Robert Bigelow said when he asked if he was afraid that people might think he was crazy because he admitted that he believed in extraterrestrials. I don't care. It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change the reality of what I know. Amen. Young's choice of the word apparently, quote unquote, is echoed by the contemporary media about UFOs. The sound bites for the X-Files convey a similar attitude toward the potential reality of the UFO. The meme, I want to believe, does not express the belief, but the desire to believe. Belief is postponed. The truth is out there, performs the very same function. The truth is somewhere, but not here, not now. It will be here someday. That the truth is postponed does not make it false. It makes it future real. Thus, the first takeaway from Young's speculations, of which he was guilty, was the proposition, if only as a figure of speech, that the phenomena was potentially real. The other takeaway has to do with the notion of amplificatory interpretation, or the creation of the meaning of the UFO after the initial confusion of seeing one, as well as before seeing one. The people I've interviewed have resisted in every way that they could, but it is impossible to resist entirely. 70 years after Young's analysis, well before Scott, Allison, James, Tyler, or I were born, everyone has been subjected to the universal mass rumor of the UFO. It is something from which none of us could possibly escape. We have all been exposed from childhood and throughout our lives to media about the UFO, both as entertainment and as possible reality, as when it surfaces as a topic on local news stations. How does one come to deem an anomalous event as a UFO event? Often, this is facilitated by a book encounter. And I love book encounters. Book encounters are when you're thinking about something, or you see a UFO, or you have a weird encounter, and then the next second, the next day, the next time you're in a bookstore, guess what? A book on the very same topic appears to you. The next book that you need to read. Much like tonight, when we were reading, and DW mentioned, I'm going to find the book right now, because we're going to read it. And DW mentioned Out There, The Government's Secret Quest for Extraterrestrials by Howard Bloom. That is a book encounter for us, and we need to get that book. So get ready for the book encounter. Each of the people I interviewed who said they believed in their anomalous experiences were connected to the UFO phenomenon had a book encounter at some point after their experience, which sometimes persisted over half a lifetime. They were given, came upon, or in some perceived miraculous way, they were directed to read a book that put their experiences into perspective and seemed to explain them. Arthur Koestler describes a serendipitous arrival of the very book one needs when one needs it as the experience of the library angel. It was Carl Sagan's book about the cosmos that changed Tyler's life and started him on the path of fusing what he learned in the space program with his ideas about biotechnologies to form companies that helped heal people. The book appeared mysteriously in his luggage at a point in his life when he was lost and desperate. For James, the book was John Mack's Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. Dude, yes. And we've been reading that on screen. That's so sick. Which he picked up on a whim, believing it to be science fiction. The book read like his own biography. It helped him frame his experience as being related to UFOs. Scott's book, Out There, The Government's Secret Quest for Extraterrestrials, popped up at him while he was walking through a bookstore. Although this is not surprising, he was in a bookstore after all. The book was unlike anything that he would have chosen to read, yet he felt compelled to read it. Echoing James's experience, the book seemed to Scott to read like his biography and triggered the processes whereby he started to piece together his obsession. The book encounter differs from the library angel experience in that the books offer the readers an explanatory framework for their experiences. One doesn't have to accept the book's framework. Scott's care and sophistication with regard to his belief structures, qualities he says he did not possess in the beginning of his research but forged over time, are instructive. It shows how anomalous experiences become connected to a cultural narrative. As I studied his photographs and placed them back on the table, Scott offered his observations. After I read the book Out There and numerous other books, I thought differently about the experiences I had as a child. Really, I could not avoid the fact that they were so similar to what was being reported by people who said they were abducted and by whose stories were in the books, like Out There. But I also knew that I didn't know this beyond a doubt. I could not honestly make a direct link between my childhood experiences and the aerial objects I started to record. But intuitively, I think there is a link. Most people are not as careful or as restrained as Scott. If they had had an anomalous experience and they happened upon a book that seems to explain them, they will assume that their experiences relate to the theory presented in this book, the library angel experience or the book phenomena. This is a normal process and is what Jung was getting at when he proposed the concept of amplificatory interpretation, in which the unconscious amplifies the associations related to an image or group of images and creates a meaningful framework that is then associated with events or experiences. It is partly how cultural narratives are produced, and while the concept appears reductive, it is not. It admits to a real objective event. It just refrains from identifying with certainty what the event is. I mean, that's all we can do, right? Instead, it focuses on the meaning projected upon and associated with the event. And that's all paranormal events. I've delved into the process of the creation of the UFO cultural narrative elsewhere. I have interviewed Edward Carlos, a professor of art whose anomalous experiences were featured in John Mack's book, Abduction. Ooh, we got to read that. We have that. Okay. He resisted the term abduction so strongly that I felt the need to rewrite and publish his experiences from his perspective. His story and his subsequent publication illustrate well the process of first experiencing anomalous events, then determining what they are, and ultimately determining that they are what they are called. Carlos, as he likes to be addressed, noted that while Mack was attentive to his feelings, he felt Mack never had a grasp of the real phenomenon. Carlos used the language of several traditions to illustrate his experiences. He said the light beings he encountered were sometimes like angels and sometimes like aliens, but they transcended the language of both Catholic and contemporary UFO traditions. Yet his experiences became UFO related for a wide audience after the publication and success of Mack's book. Carlos never called his experiences abductions or said that they had to do with UFOs. But that is how they were understood after Mack's book framed them that way. Interesting. Mack, why'd you do that, brother? You gotta present people's stories accurately. Oh no. In my article, I described the experience of Saint Teresa of Avila, a 16th century Catholic nun, an extraordinary woman. She instigated such significant change for the Catholic Church of her time, both theologically and socially, that the modern church bestowed upon her one of its highest honors, Pope Paul VI made her an official doctor of the church, a title previously held almost exclusively by men. In the beginning of my shift away from researching Catholic history and towards modern-day UFO events, I revisited Teresa's own testimony about one of her famous anomalous events. Her status as a mystic began with a most unusual occurrence, which even she had a hard time understanding. It is commonly referred to as the ecstasy of Teresa, or the transverberation of Saint Teresa, which means to be pierced through. She wrote about it in her diary. Beside me on the left hand appeared an angel in bodily form, such as I am not in the habit of seeing except very rarely. Though I often have visions of angels, I did not see them. They come to me only after the manner of the first type of vision that I described. But it was our Lord's will that I should see this angel in the following way. He was not tall but short and very beautiful, and his face was so aflame that he appeared to be one of the highest rank of angels, who seemed to be all on fire. In his hands I saw a great golden spear, and the iron tip there appeared to be a point of fire. And he plunged this into my heart several times, so that it penetrated my entrails. When he pulled it out, I felt that he took them with it. And left me utterly consumed by the great love of God. The pain was so severe that it made me utter several moans. The sweetness caused by this intense pain was so extreme that one cannot possibly wish it to cease, nor is one's soul then content with anything but God. This is not a physical but a spiritual pain, though my body has some share in it. And that's so similar to a lot of the abduction experiences from John Mack's book, where people describe like the great pain that they're put through during the experience, but it leads to this like feeling of spiritual enlightenment or ecstasy. That's so wild. I had read this account many times. An angel pierces Teresa, and she goes into religious ecstasy. That is how I had always read the passage. After I had my realization that modern UFO reports were in some ways similar to the historical accounts of religious phenomena, I decided to reread some of the primary sources from Catholic history. My new reading proved very interesting. I never paid attention to the fact that her description differs radically from most of the artistic representations of it. There are paintings and also a famous sculpture by Bernini. They depict Teresa near a little angel with a small dart. They do not depict the illuminated nature of the small being, nor do they show Teresa's confusion about the being, why it was real and not imagined, which would be difficult anyway. I was particularly struck by her confusion. She doesn't know how to interpret this being. Is it an angel? And why is it different from the angel she had seen in the past? To think through the event and make sense of it, she turned to her books in her time. Catholic angelology, which was known by her confessors, the men in whom she confided. Her book encounter, facilitated by her confessors, helped her understand her experience as religious, having to do with Catholicism and God. The book encounter is one step in the process of determining that anomalous experiences are related to UFOs, or as in Teresa's case, to God and religion. In these examples, the medium is a book, but it could be very well a movie or a documentary that provides the explanatory framework. Interestingly, the two interpretations that the experiences are related to religion or that they are related to UFOs are by no means mutually exclusive. That there is a biblical UFO hermeneutic that provides a way to interpret these experiences as being both religious and related to UFOs. Several religious groups, such as the Nation of Islam, are informed by such a strategy. Eddie, an experiencer I met, saw no problem in conflating UFOs with biblical events. I met Eddie at a local UFO conference where he related his experiences. He said that he regularly saw flying saucers, usually in formation, and always 15 or more, though often nobody around him could see them, leaving him as the only witness. For a year, he tried to get his wife to see the saucers, and finally she did. She even caught them on camera, producing 10 pictures of the saucers. he had brought a magnifying glass to the conference so we can get a good look at him. When I asked him what he thought of these visitations, he asked me if I had read the Bible. I certainly had, I told him. Then you should already know what these things are, he said, surprised. I might know, but please explain. Well, Jesus went up in the clouds on a saucer, and he will come down again, just as he went up, he explained. Some theologians read the Bible in a similar manner. For them, the UFO or flying saucer is equivalent to an aerial phenomena mentioned in Scripture. In the late 1960s, Presbyterian minister Barry Downing advocated for this interpretation in the Bible and flying saucers. The Reverend Michael J. S. Carter, a graduate of the Union Theological Seminary, offers a contemporary version of this claim. His book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, argues that the Bible is a history of human contact with extraterrestrials. It's like an Ancient Aliens version. Synchronicity and the UFO event. And this is a quote from David Stinnett. They've always been a reality. What they are is still a theory. One of Scott's mentors and inspirations is David Stinnett. David has been a UFO researcher for more than 30 years and served as the director of the annual New Jersey UFO Conference. He has been a student of the Bible for over 20 years, and he is a Christian. He is an active field researcher who travels to hotspots of activity with his video equipment, the deployment of which is guided by the years of knowledge and experience he brings to his work. David, of all the researchers and scientists I met, is the least likely to draw any conclusions whatsoever about the phenomenon. His influence on Scott helped in the field maintain its rigorous standards. Many years ago, I was going about my business on an ordinary day in New Jersey. I was on a back road in central New Jersey. I then saw a gunmetal gray aircraft. It looked exactly like a C-140 transport. It was creeping up very slowly, and it caught my attention. It was completely silent. I exited my car with my camera, and when I tried to capture the object in my finder, it would not show up. I jumped back into my car, and I tested the camera on other objects. My camera was just fine. I jumped out again to capture the image, and the thing was gone. I went home and walked into the room where I kept a library of UFO papers, white papers, research books, and lots of information. Instead of grabbing what was most convenient, like something on the top of the pile of papers, I reached under a huge stack of papers and rustled out a VHS tape. It was a video of Dr. Bruce Cornett giving a lecture at the New Jersey UFO Conference. In the video, Cornett described in perfect detail the craft I had seen. He just automatically went to the info he needs. Whoop, 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 whoop. There was a pause in our interview. I said, a synchronicity. Yeah, a synchronicity. He said this deadpan. I could tell that he wasn't buying it. He had related an event that was like a book encounter, but involving a VHS tape. But he wasn't taking the bait. I found this refreshing and fascinating. Synchronicities are one aspect of the phenomena, UFOs. He elaborated. If a researcher does not experience them, he or she is not really doing the research right. But, and this is important, a researcher doesn't have to accept that the synchronicities mean anything. They need to be careful because synchronicities are very convincing when you experience them. They could lead you off the right track, and the right track is not to be convinced. We see orbs or we see unexplainable craft, and most people jump to the conclusion that it represents extraterrestrials from outer space. I do not make that jump. One aspect of the phenomena, UFOs, pointed out by Vallée, as well as by George Hansen, is that it tricks and deceives. Researchers, interesting, when they encounter the real phenomena, are so amazed by these aspects of it that they go off the deep end in their theories and conclusions. They are convinced that only they have these meaningful synchronicities. These very real experiences dupe them into believing that the phenomena is what they think it is. Well, it's not. Synchronicity, as defined by Carl Jung, is coming together of an inner and outer events that are not casually linked, but are very meaningful to those who experience them. The UFO community is not the only community that experiences the synchronicity. In my research into Christian communities, I found that many people interpret synchronicities or meaningful quinkydinks as signs from God, or meaningful events that show them that they are on the right path in life. David's position on the experiences of synchronicity was atypical. He did not assume that they meant anything deep or profound. He certainly was aware of them, however. I had been introduced to a similar position of restraint in the midst of having a full-blown synchronicity. After college, I had tried to read the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. His work had come highly recommended, but the passages I read always seemed misogynist. After a few pages of reading, I would close the book in disgust. Friends insisted, however, that I should try to get past this unfortunate aspect of his work. One friend who had given me a copy of The Gay Science, which I placed on my nightstand and promptly forgot. It was New Year's Eve that night. That night I went to bed early and fell asleep immediately. At midnight I had awakened to fireworks and the merrymaking of New Year's revelers. Amid the noise, I had no hope of returning to sleep, so I picked up the book on my nightstand. I opened it up randomly. The book was organized in a series of aphorisms. I happened to open it to the only 3 aphorisms in the whole book devoted to New Year's Eve. The first was titled Sanctus Januarius, Saint Januarius, or Holy January. I knew that Nietzsche was referring to the miracle of Saint Januarius, whose dried blood is preserved in a capsule, and every year on New Year's Day is taken out and miraculously liquefies. Nietzsche used this miracle as a metaphor for his own experience of having his life transformed apparently on New Year's Eve, from dead and dry to profoundly alive. The next aphorism was about how on New Year's Eve Nietzsche declared that he would affirm life no matter what it would bring him. Amore fati, the love of fate. So here I was on New Year's Eve, and I had randomly opened the book to aphorisms about New Year's Eve. This struck me as a meaningful event. Indeed, it was a synchronicity. As my friends had predicted, I was sucked into Nietzsche's philosophy. I eagerly turned the page to find out what more he had to say. What would I find next? The next aphorism stopped me cold. It was about synchronicities, an instance of which I was currently experiencing. The feeling was uncanny. The book had suddenly become a very scary book. This aphorism, I knew, would now speak to me personally, and it did. I took a breath and proceeded to read the entire thing. There is a certain high point in life, and this is Nietzsche's words on synchronicities. There is a certain high point in life. Once we have reached that, we are, for all our freedom, once more in the greatest danger of spiritual unfreedom. And no matter how much we have faced up to the beautiful chaos of existence and denied it all providential reason and goodness, we still have to pass our hardest test. For it is only now that the idea of personal providence confronts us with the most penetrating force, and the best advocate for it, the evidence of our eyes, speaks for it. Now, when it is obvious that all and everything that happens to us always turns out for the best, the life of every day and every hour seems to be anxious for nothing else but always to prove the proposition anew. Let it be what it will, bad or good, whether the loss of a friend, a sickness, a calamity, the non-receipt of a letter, the spraining of one's foot, a glance into a shop window, a counter argument, the opening of a book, a dream, a deception. It shows itself immediately or very soon afterwards as something not permitted to be absent. It is full of profound significance and utility precisely for us. It is there for a more dangerous temptation to rid ourselves of the belief in gods of Epicurus, those careless unknown gods, and believe in some anxious and mean divinity who knows personally every little hair on our heads and feels no disgust in rendering the most wretched services, Well, I mean, in spite of all this, we want to leave the gods alone, and the serviceable genie likewise, and wish to content ourselves with the assumption that our own practical and theoretical skillfulness in explaining and suitably arranging events has now reached the highest point. We do not want to either to think too highly of this dexterity of our wisdom, when the wonderful harmony which results from playing on our instruments sometimes surprises us too much, a harmony which sounds too well for us to dare to ascribe it to ourselves. In fact, now and then there is one who plays with us, beloved Chance. He leads our hand occasionally, and even all the wisest providence could not devise any finer music than that of which our foolish hand is then capable. So, basically, what Nietzsche is saying there, in a lot of words, is that we are the makers of our own destiny. And in my head, what's playing right now is from Titanic, Billy Zane, how he makes his own luck. Nietzsche's arguing that all these synchronicities are of our own making. And to be careful not to get sucked too much into that sort of thing, because you don't know where it might be leading you. Which, I mean, hey, I could walk with that. You really got to examine things, right, before you just jump into things. But I believe that's what he's saying from his many words to my so few words. That could be wrong. The irony of the irony of this aphorism stung. Yeah, because she's reading all her stuff about New Year's, being like, "Oh my God, I'm having a synchronicity." And on the very next page, Nietzsche's like, "No, you are not having a synchronicity. This is of your own mind to help prove yourself something." But yeah, and exactly, VR dude. You always had to watch that to get to the good shows, I feel like. That's why I remember that song. The irony of the aphorism stung. While having a synchronistic event, Nietzsche explained that one should not ascribe to it any deep or profound meaning. If I did, I would be ignoring my freedom and would be in danger of embracing dogmas, or worse, believing in an anxious divinity that knows how many hairs I possess on my head. Obviously a reference to the God of the New Testament. The cognitive dissonance of the event was so great that I have never forgotten it, and here was David Stinnett reminding me that there are people who are steeped in meaningful coincidence and synchronicities, yet refrain from drinking the Kool-Aid and believing that they might indicate deep, profound meaning. David does not draw any overarching conclusions about the UFO phenomenon other than that it is real and that it deceives, but he believes it is real. I mean, yeah. That's all we can do. We know all this weird shit's real. We don't know anything else. After seeing some of Allison's videos posted online, he took a trip to her house and witnessed it for himself. Oh yeah, Allison's phenomenon, UFOs, is the real deal. When I was out there, so was Homeland Security. She's got all kinds of people visiting her and seeing the orbs and other things out in the skies above the woods and near her house. Again, they know. They be knowing. The government, Homeland Security's out there. That's wild. After my interview with David, he sent me a quote from Carl Jung about synchronicity. I took it to clarify his position, that synchronicity is not such a big deal, and in fact, if you're doing things correctly, it is how the world functions. Synchronicity is the ever-present reality for those with eyes to see. And I feel like, man, I really like that explanation of synchronicities. That's a lot like what Itzhak Bentov talks about in The Mechanics of Consciousness. Like how the universe or the consciousness, whatever you want to refer to it as, loves balance. And that's why when you're watching lights that are blinking on blinkers that might be slightly off, you'll notice they'll go in sync. Or the pendulum, when they're all swinging at different moments, they'll align. Well, Bung, though, there's scientific explanations for it. The universe loves balance. That's why you'll find balance everywhere. That's why it happens. It seeks synchronicities and balance. It's gotta have eyes to see, as they say. A new type of real. When my research shifted from Catholic history to the UFO phenomena, I presented my initial conclusions about its objective reality, to Jacques Vallée, Jeff Kripal, and a few other academics who were engaged in the research. It proved to be an utterly foolish move. As I know now, one cannot just conclude about the UFO phenomena like this. That's akin to concluding things about something as complicated as gravity or light. Scientists still don't know what makes up gravity or light. The astronomer and director of the Vatican Observatory, Brother Guy Consolmagano, reminds us, truth is a moving target. And scientists try their best to identify it. But knowledge is acquired in time and therefore incomplete. In my foolish attempt to think through the ontological status of UFOs, I had argued that they were real only in the virtual sense. That was my conclusion, and I quoted the French scholar Jean Baudrillard, as if that would somehow support my point. Jacques' gentle chastisement was swift. It is unwise to ignore the ontological aspect of UFOs. My point about its virtual reality was a good one, but he was subtly saying ignoring its status as real, albeit incomprehensible, ignoring its status as a real, albeit incomprehensible object was foolish. And as I came to see, Tyler and James's research suggested that its strange reality produced revolutionary and very real products. And one of the coolest things Tyler made, if you weren't with us for the first chapter, was he was able to figure out this language or this coding that you etch onto bones, and it talks to the other bones in your body, and it creates new bone or healthy bone tissue. Not like a new bone, but like healthy bone tissue. Like a woman with bone cancer, doctor said she'd never walk again. Tyler gave her his treatment. Her bones started talking to each other. Boom, she was walking. Just really cool shit like that. And he says that came to him as a memory. All his inventions, all his ideas, he says they come to him as memories. They're just like a memory that he has. And he gets these memories from an off-world intelligence that he's in contact with. And he's one of the top-level scientists at NASA. Most space shuttles that go into space have an experiment from Tyler on it. Since he's not a PhD, he can't go into space and run them. So typically a scientist runs them for him. Eventually, I knew that my task was to document the formation of a new religious form, not to reach ultimate conclusions about the ontological status of the mystery. I worked with communities of people who, like Tyler and James, believed that they interfaced with the phenomenon, UFOs and aliens, directly. What they were doing was genuinely incredible and led me to seriously consider the realism of their research. I assumed that their work would spawn rumors, as Young calls them, shoots of information, or just hints of information, that others would then interpret and spin into stories and narratives that would then constitute the UFO narrative. And ultimately, religion. And indeed, this does happen. But Tyler and James are invisible. Their work and the fruits of their work will not appear on Facebook. Scott and Allison are public. They are known. My work with them further helped me see how those who are the most involved with the phenomenon, UFOs and aliens, who are known, work furiously to try and correct the great variety of its virtual lives. This task is noble, but ultimately futile. Just as Teresa of Avila's representations in art and sculpture tell a story, but don't tell the story, Scott tries doggedly to correct the story, even as he knows it as a losing battle. Toward the end of my interview with Scott, he got silent. I could tell that he wanted to say something, and whatever it was pained him. The problem, he said, is that it is now almost impossible to do my job. The technology that is out there makes it impossible to tell the difference between what is real and what is fake. Fuck. My videographers and I find it hard to make the distinction if the tools the fakers use are sophisticated enough. And that makes me think of old whoop whoop. Where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. Makes me think of one of my old Werner von Braun here, scientist who came over to us from Germany after World War II, father of our one of the grandpappies of our space program. Allegedly, on his deathbed, he told his caretaker that if there ever is an alien invasion, that it's going to be a Phalian invasion, a fake alien invasion. Now, the fact that the technology is so good, and it's probably been so good, to just make that it's indistinguishable now to experts. It's like, so for me, hostile entities that would just like show up and try and take over Earth, that's gonna be a no from me. That's gonna be fake. That's gonna be something controlled by us, a programmed life form or some shit. I don't think. I just think that it's like, you know, if these aliens, entities, higher dimensional, higher consciousness, whatever the fuck they are, angels, demons, I don't know, technology, us from the future, if they were out there and wanted to take over, why I think they would have done that, right? I don't know jack about fart, but it's just, I feel that's, I don't know. Anywho, back to the book here. We're rounding the bases towards the end, about to get some more pictures, so buckle up. We stared at each other in silence. I was reminded of a recent incident on social media in which Scott had exposed a series of images of supposed UFOs. The original photographs had garnished a large following. The images were of a distant object that was circular and did not look like an airplane or anything conventionally seen in the sky. Scott took the images, blew them up, and posted them side by side, showing what they really were, which were different types of oddly shaped balloons. He posted these on forums. Scott knew the phenomena, and this was not it. They were simply balloons. And this is in figure 3.2. I'll show you guys that now. So this is what people thought was an alien. Spacecraft, just balloons, folks. And I'll make that more clear in the YouTube video. But it does look like a spacecraft. I can see why that'd be confusing. But sorry, folks. Stamped from Scott. Balloons. Scott's intervention prompted an interesting reaction from those who had posted the images. They promoted the photographs as real UFOs, and they also accepted the truth of Scott's expose. Instead of reaching the conclusion that they had misidentified the balloons as UFOs, they said that the UFOs had disguised themselves as balloons. No. Feel like they would just disappear. I don't know. That's so funny. I tell you what, no, they just disguise themselves as balloons now. For them, the objects really were UFOs, but UFOs ingeniously disguised as simple balloons. They must have read Jacques Vallée's book, Messengers of Deception. This response, though perhaps surprising, is not unprecedented. In the 1950s, 3 Stanford University sociologists infiltrated a small UFO group whose leader, Marion Keech, predicted the arrival of UFOs amid a global cataclysm. Faced with the fact that Creech's predictions did not come true, members of the group concluded that they had avoided the global cataclysm by placing their faith in Keech and her contacts with extraterrestrials. The sociologists had assumed that they would come to disbelieve Keech, but that didn't exactly happen. Instead, some of her followers reinterpreted the meaning of the events in a way that supported their faith in Keech and their original beliefs. I mean, that's what people do, unfortunately. That's why, careful if you're following someone, again, like the theme in this book. If anyone's telling you why, if anyone's saying they know who they are or what they are, careful with groups, I'm telling you. That says interesting. You curve your belief to mold into whatever you want. And that's everybody, right? We all do that in our little bubbles. Scott told me another example of how faked UFO photos inform the cultural narrative about UFOs. Early in his research, Scott came across a website challenging anyone to fake a believable UFO in a photo and explain in detail how it was done. He used a simple method to show how an experiencer was able to create a realistic looking UFOs using ordinary household items. In the years following this educational attempt, Scott endured the reappearance of his faked UFO photos in many guises, always represented as UFO. No, real UFO. No. Oh no. Oh, that's such a bummer. The best efforts, right? So Scott tries to educate us by showing how easy it is to fake UFO photos, but his fake UFO photos get sent around as real. That's scary. Like, what do we know? What do we know? What is even real? Am I real? Am I just like AI? Oh gosh. No, I am though. I'm not an AI, I promise. God, that's a bummer. Anywho, he saw how the world of virtual reality eats up the conventionally real and spits it out as something entirely alien. Alien, that is, to his original intent and purpose. Scott and I said our goodbyes, and I returned reluctantly to the sweltering heat and humidity of North Carolina. Based on my work with Tyler, James, Scott, Allison, and David, as well as others, I knew that there was an unexplained phenomenon, UFOs and aliens. I also knew that the cultural narratives about it had nothing, or at least very little, to do with the phenomenon. They captured an experience. The cultural narratives were formed through processes anticipated by Jung with his concept of amplificatory interpretations. 70 years on, interpretations of the phenomenon, UFOs and aliens, were being amplified exponentially through a new social medium that included bots and computer algorithms, not just people. I found myself returning to my original discarded claim, the one that had humiliated me with the group of researchers. The reality, quote unquote, of the phenomenon is virtual. But this time I wasn't implying that it meant it wasn't real. I had given up the dualism of real and virtual. Ooh. What's virtual is real. The monolith returns. During our trip to New Mexico, and this is when they went to one of the other secret crash sites that happened outside of Roswell in 1947. During our trip to New Mexico, James told me that he thought the artifact that he found in the desert was a donation, most likely from a non-human intelligence. You mean like the monolith in 2001: A Space Odyssey? I asked him at the time. Yes. Is it good, James? Is the donation for our benefit? James was silent as he considered the question. It's too early to tell. As I thought through the objective nature of the UFO phenomenon, I kept returning to Kubrick's film and the monolith. The monolith appears in key scenes throughout the movie, leaving viewers and critics wondering about its message. According to James, a fan of science fiction and of the original book by Arthur C. Clarke, we have to get that OG book. His short stories are fucking great. On which the movie was based. The monolith is a donation supposedly from a more advanced species, but its meaning remains mysterious. A clue is given in the beginning of the scene with the proto-hominids, who use it to establish dominance over another tribe. The monolith is perhaps a tool of control. It accompanies humans throughout their evolution, and even on their journeys, through the creation of the artificial intelligence, the computer HAL in the movie, that eventually leads them off of Earth and into the frontier of space. As I watched the scenes with the monolith, I realized that it resembled a larger version of my iPhone. The interpretation of the monolith as a screen and particularly a movie screen was first advanced by Rob Ager on his website collaborativelearning.com. Ager studies and creates films and has published an extensive analysis of the symbols of the films of Stanley Kubrick, as well as those of many other filmmakers. In a series of videos, Ager provides in-depth analysis of the visual aspects of the monolith, taking the viewer through each of the varied scenes in which it appears. Ager notes that at one point the monolith even collapses into the movie screen. The monolith, according to Ager, is the cinema screen. I find Ager's interpretation convincing. He argues that this interpretation of the monolith excludes reading it as a donation from an alien race. For Ager, the monolith has nothing to do with alien technology. I am convinced by Ager's analysis that the monolith is the cinema screen, but I believe the monolith can be both cinema screen and the alien. And it is both on many different levels. These two interpretations are not mutually exclusive. Amen, yeah. Because everything is everything all the time, right? It could be the cinema screen and a donation from extraterrestrials. Scott's group exists to erect and sustain a boundary between what they believe to be real representations of the UFO phenomena and what is clearly faked representations. Scott's fear is that advanced media and computer technologies are erasing this boundary altogether. Scott's intuitions are correct, but the problem is intrinsic to the UFO. If one situates the phenomenon within the context of media studies and media ecology, it appears that the digital infrastructure determines and provides an environment ripe for this now pervasive belief system. Within a digital landscape, the distinction between the real and the unreal ceases to be meaningful. The loss of this modernist framework gives way to a transcendent one, which qualities that appear to collapse or more accurately exceed the modern constructions of real and not real. As Jean Baillarod and others have long argued, the real and unreal are no longer meaningful categories of frame of reference. That doesn't mean that this framework doesn't exist. It simply means that it is irrelevant to many people. I mean, yeah, seriously, that's how it works now. Woo! What a time to be alive! To the extent that theories of UFOs, including extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, and interdimensionally, presuppose a modernist framework of the real and the not real, they miss how these reports emerge from specific historical context. The historical shift from modernity to postmodernity and the pervasive effects of the media infrastructure determine and frame our perceptions. I am not throwing out or discounting the reality of the UFO. I suggest that it should cause us to rethink our own constructions of what we consider to be real. Because things we commonly take to be unreal in a materialist sense, like movies and video games, have real psychological and cognitive effects. Media technologies have as much of an impact on human bodies as biotechnologies, and perhaps even more. Ooh, interesting. So that is chapter 3. Next Saturday, we'll be reading chapter 4, and that is titled When Star Wars Became Real. Ooh. So I'm excited to get into that. Thank you for joining me. That was a wild ride through the philosophy and the birth of the myth and truth of the UFO. And I love how it is both myth and reality. It's like what we know about it is myth, but it's also real and it's here. And that myth could also be partly true, depending, because we don't know what they actually are, but part of it could be the real thing. We don't even know that. I love that it exists in this limbo of like fiction, reality and non-reality. And then how DW talks about how a lot of thinkers are saying that doesn't even, like, the line between reality and non-reality with the technologies we're experiencing and, you know, what it is on the internet doesn't even matter anymore. So it's very interesting. Thank you for joining me for this Midnight Book Club. I'm gonna get in on some gaming next. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll be diving. Maybe I'll be doing something else. Who knows? But stick around if you'd like. If not, I'll be back Wednesday morning with some book club. We're gonna save American Cosmic for Saturday, just so we could think about what we read, digest it. But check out the reads on the YouTube if you want to check them out. I splice them together so they're a little shorter, add some pictures. And that's the Midnight Book Club. Bye.